Didn't see you come in. Just you caught me hard at work preparing for a future video. But today, I think we need to look more at submarines. So this is going to be a behind-the-scenes look at how I put together the program, the loading screens, bit of machine code, the sounds and all that sort of thing. It was a bit too long for the main video, so I've added it all in together to show you a bit of the of how the magic happens. Yes. Hope you enjoy. One of the ways I always like to spice up these games is to use a font. And I always tend to go back to Charbank from Colombo Roberto, or Roberto Colombo, 1986. Premi and Tasto per Iniziare. It came from an Italian magazine, and it's a collection of fonts, and also includes a font editor. So obviously it's Italian, but you press a key to start. It's nicely presented. It has lots of fonts. So you press Q and Z to move up and down. It comes with 32 different font sets, and you can edit things as well. So we're going to look for a military font, because it's a Navy game. So looking on the left, we've got various sci-fi type fonts. 1 and 2. 3 is also a bit sci-fi. 4, they're not really suitable. 8 is a bit gothic. However, looking around, you see on the right-hand side, font number 14 looks like a stencil that you get in World War II. So that's the sound of that. And all we can do on this screen is just look at the first 10 letters of each font and see what they look like. We can then go and look at Visione di un set, which is examine a set. We want to see what set 14 looks like to make sure there's nothing strange there. And this is all pretty good. Only thing that's a little bit strange is that we don't have a semicolon. See, you go 8, 9, colon, and then another apostrophe. But apart from that, capital letters are all nice and military. Lowercase is a bit dull, but it works. So once you're happy with the font you've got, you can edit it, but you can go then to I/O. And what we're going to do here is save this font 14 to a new virtual tape. We can save set predefined. So which one do you want? We've got number 14. Record and play to a new tape, and then we are done. So how are you going to get your font in place? So what I always like to do is have a loader program. So I'm going to load the font into memory, but the best thing to do is always to clear some memory so the basic code won't overwrite it. And if you run out of memory, it'll tell you. 3999 says that's the last I'm going to use. So I want to load the font, which is a series of bytes, 768 bytes. But I must tell the Spectrum where to put it, otherwise I'm left to the mercies of whoever saved it. And if it was saved in a 48K machine, then it'll be at a not so good address. So we've now loaded our font into address 31,000. We now need to tell the Spectrum how to use the font. There are 2 addresses in memory where we need to put the address, which is referred to as the chars variable, which is 23606 and 7. It's 2 bytes and it's little endian, so we need to put 2 bytes in there, and also it's 256 less than what you think it is. So here I'm working out what the 2 bytes are. The high byte is how many 256s there are in 31,000. Low is what's left over. So poking the low byte into 23606. The high byte should go into 23607, but it's minus 256. Now, fortunately, it's already 256, so we just have to take away 1. It's the high byte. That will now set the font to what we loaded it as. We now want to have a nice loading screen, which is what we do here, and finally we get to load the program. What I've omitted to do is put in the magical Jonathan Caldwell poke, which stops the loader from wrecking the screen. We'll look at that in a little while, if I remember. Then we save the whole loader routine as subhunt, because all 3 games are called subhunt. So you save this as subhunt, and when it loads, automatically run line 1. So we're expecting to find a font, then a screen, then the program. And it's all good. So how do you get your loading screen? You can draw it yourself using BASIC, and I've done one of them in BASIC, and with a little bit of machine code from Houston and Hardman, but Instead here, I'm going to be lazy and use ZX Paintbrush, a lovely tool from Klaus Jahn, which is available from zxmodules.de. It's Paintbrush, but for the ZX Spectrum. But the main thing I'm using it for is the importing of pictures. So here I'm importing a picture from Wikipedia of a German UC-1 class Water 1 submarine used for mine laying. And I've imported the picture and it's basically spectrumifying it. And it does it by default as the size it is, but we don't want the size it is, we want the size of the screen. So we select the screen string size, and then we get to play with the brightness and the contrast. And it's a black and white picture, so it does look quite nice black and white, but I want it to be blue like the sea. So by pressing around with brightness and contrast, you get various effects. You can also shift the picture to the left or to the top slightly, because spectrum attributes are on a 8x8 basis. You can turn on dithering, which gives you more, rather than go for black and white, it goes for grayscale or mono. And you adjust this as you see fit until you get a picture that you like the look of. Once you're finally happy with it, you get to see what it looks like. And you can zoom in and see, you can do various pokes and peeks, but I think that'll do for our purposes. And then you just export it as a varying types of file. So you can save it as a various image files. So what we want is to save it as a TZX tape file to use in one of our loading routines. So we're going to call it a TZX file. Give it a nice name. See all the files I've got loaded up. And we just give it a header name, because obviously all programs have a header name, including bits and bytes, calling it subhunt. And that'll do. So we have our lovely screen, but we want to add on some extra information on the screen, so as in the author of the game and the title of the game. And we have a couple of rows at the bottom of the screen we can use to do that. So here I've loaded the screen, it's all loaded okay, so it looks nice. So that's what we get when we load, nothing at the bottom of the screen. It's a bit of a waste of real estate. So we now write a little program to load the screen into memory. We're then going to print at the bottom 2 lines of the screen, which you normally can't print at, but by doing print #0, you have access to the bottom 2 rows. So here we're going to say John Hall, the author of this particular subhunt, proudly presents Subhunt. So here we got Subhunt and 2 exclamation marks fitting in quite nicely on the bottom row of the screen with a bit of flash. Yep, that looks pretty good. We get what we want. So now we're going to save that new screen as Subhunt. If you run that, we save the tape, press record and play. Do we get what we actually want? Let's find out. Clear the screen, load the new screen, and pause. No, we don't. We don't get the bottom 2 rows because that's where the input press record and play comes in. So now I'm going to load our fancy font into memory first. So now I've got a nice military font. It looks a bit tidier. And now we have to get the faffing involved. You need to copy the screen somewhere else and then save it from there instead. So when you say screen string, that just means save it as code from 16384 for a length of 6912. You can copy stuff in BASIC to anywhere you like, and it's doable. It just takes a while, even with an emulator at 10 times speed. It takes a considerable amount of time, maybe a minute or so, or 30 seconds, or whatever. But it's not 0. But we have 12 bytes of machine code. You can do it for you. So I'm creating a little routine to load the 12 bytes of machine code into memory. We're putting it all into 32,000, and we're starting with the last 3 bytes, which are with the instructions elder, which is load immediate and load increment repeat. So what that does, it loads a byte from the address in register pair HL to the address in the register pair DE, and then subtracts 1 from the register pair BC until it's 0. So that's what you do there. And then we go, right, 01 is load register pair BC, and we're to load it with 6912. which is a base 10 value. We have to convert it into hex, and then because Z80 is little endian, we put the small byte first. So that's where you get 027. We now need to load the high value pair, and see here I get very confused at what I'd want to do. So 21 in hex is not 21 in decimal, and 16384 in decimal is not hex 4000, but in fact hex 6400. This will bite me in the arse later several times. The final instruction is load DE, which is the destination where I'm copying to. This starts with hex 11, which is not decimal 11, but it should actually be 17. But at least I've got the address right, and it's 80E8, which I reverse. I then go into calculator and turn it back into decimal. This will keep biting me in the bottom. This simple thing, which I've done several times before, took about 20 minutes. So now we run this, but we don't want to save the screen. We've got to run the machine code first, which is at address 32,000. What I need to do is say, look, change the code to load from address 33,000, where I think I'm saving it to. So we have this. It all looks good. Let's load it from the tape. Does it look good? Let's find out. What have we actually saved? A black screen. Because what we're saving from is not the screen, but somewhere else in memory. Which is all empty and not so good. Because this also, we're not even saved anything because the instructions we think we're doing aren't even doing it. So we need to change the addresses. So it's hex 1, hex 11, hex 21, which is decimal 1, decimal 16, so decimal 17, and decimal 33. Now this is still wrong, but it's better. It's better wrong, this. So now see what we get. Now we get random data and random blobs, because where we're saving from, remember this is the screen, is not address 4000, but in fact it's 64, because I've got confused between base 10 and base 16. So do it once more with feeling. And have we got it right this time? Yes, we have. Thank God for that. So we have these fonts and loading screens and loaders and stuff. How do you put them all together? You could do it by faffing around with virtual tapes, or you can use ZX Blockeditor, also by Klaus Jahn from zxmodules.de, which is an actual tape editor. So we're going to load in our program. That's our loader program, which we called subhunt, line 1. And we're now going to import using the tools routine. Here we are, tools import file. We can say, what do we want to import? Well, we want to import the font or the screen. I forget which order we put them in. The advantage of Blockeditor is if you get them in the wrong order, you can always go back and reorder them. So we're looking for a nice loading screen. Here we are. Here's Subhunt, Screen Submarine. We'll select that. That will do nicely. And so yeah, here's all the stuff you can have. Well, we don't want all of it, so we just want the actual bytes and the data. So you've got the header and the data. You don't always need the header, but if you don't have the header, you have to use clever machine code, which I ain't doing. We also want to have the nice font. So we're going to set our military font somewhere or other. There it is. And again, we have all the information about it, what created the file. But we just want the header, which is the byte set N14. And it's 768 bytes. That's a clearance of font. And the last thing we're going to want is an actual program. So just for now, we're going to select one of our little programs. Probably John Hall Subhunt, which is a program we run at the end. Clickety, clickety, click. And that has programs, variables, and stuff. And now we have a complete little routine. File, save as. And we'll call this John Hall Subhunt Deluxe. I've not made any changes to his program as of yet, but the idea is we now have a loading routine and a nice font that we'll be using. And a nice loading screen, so it's pretty. Marvellous. So for Andrew Turner's subhunt, I wanted to add an aeroplane, which would require a user-defined graphic of 2 characters, overlaying 2 spaces. So to make life easier for this, I loaded up the user-defined graphic generator from S. Robert Spiel. I'd previously amended this for Forest Fire to create a 16x16 graphic, or 2x2. This is at double speed. I've sped up the video. So what I'm doing here is moving the cursor around and filling in individual pixels. And once I've done that, you fill in a pixel with 0 and erase it with 9. So you try and draw something that looks about right. And once you've finished, you press 1 and it tells you what the data statements are. So here I want a square that fits in a nicely 8x8. And at some point I'm going to notice that I've strayed over into the top of it. So this is actually be a 2x2 thing. So I'm trying to draw in a nice aeroplane. I've got a cockpit at the front, nice big tail fin there. I'm spending lots of time faffing around with the windows of the aeroplane, because obviously airplanes have windows, it's all quite nice. And then eventually I'll realise that the tail goes up far too much, I need to shrink it down. But it's quite easy to use, and you can see what's going on. And afterwards it prints it on the top of the screen, and you can see what it looks like, which is quite nice. Perhaps I should have a nice propeller at the front. To try and draw something like that, and then at some point I realise that just looks stupid. 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that a propeller? No, that just looks weird. That don't look right at all, does it? And that's what. Oh, hang on. The tail is too big. Let's shrink the tail down so it fits in. 2, 3, 4, 5. We want the tail to stand proud. It's a lot easier doing this than just playing with the numbers, loading it, entering graphics mode, typing in the characters, especially if the characters have to be above and below each other, because that's a lot harder to get to line up. If they're left and right, that's quite easy, to be fair, because you type graphics A, B, or whatever. But when it's above and below each other, it's a bit more of a faff. So this looks a bit more like a plane. But that propeller's got to go, so it just looks daft. So now you press 1 to see what it looks like. We have a nice protruding plane with windows. It looks like a plane. Obviously, we ignore the first 2 data rows. We're not going to be using those. But the second 2, the last 2, sorry, are the ones we actually want. So we'll take a note of those numbers and we'll load it into our game. I wanted a nice klaxon effect, but you can't really do that in beeps because you don't get a nice steady rising or even a sound with a beep. You get distinct notes. So off we go to internet and found that Owen and Audrey Bishop had written a thing called roller coaster sounds, which gives you a glissando effect, which is going up, going down, things like police sirens, sound of falling bombs, and so on, where you get a steady tone that rises and falls, not discrete beeps. And it's only 56 bytes of machine code, as we can see here. So you run the code, and it has what's called a period table, which gives you basically what sort of tones to make as it goes up and it goes down. And obviously the border changes colour as well, because whenever you use the out thing to make a noise, it changes the colour of the border. Then they say, how do you make a police siren sound? Well, to make a police siren sound, what you need to do is you change the alter table, because what you want is a tone that goes... So, 255 is the highest. As you go down, it gets lower, but here you want to go higher. So you want an ascending sound. So you need to go 255 minus J. This time the sound goes higher. You also have to tell the machine code where the start of this period table is and how long it is. Wasn't that jolly? What you put into the period table can be any numbers you like. The more complex it is, obviously trickier, longer it takes to do. But here they're going to have a play with natural logarithms, which is some kind of weird thing I don't understand. Something to do with Napier. I've got a book about Napier downstairs. One of the chapters is about Napier. He was some sort of Scottish super scientist mathematician who invented logarithms. But essentially, you were creating this little tone, and that'll give us a tweet, like a bird song. Marvellous. So you can also change it to not use natural logarithms. How about doing something fun using trigonometry? So instead of using like natural logarithms, we're going to use the sin function. We're going to add 150 to it and multiply that by some kind of magical number from 0.246, and this will give us a different kind of thing, which the bishops call mating call. So we're now changing it to the period table is a lot longer, 1,000 bytes long. Generating the period table can take a while, but once you've generated it, you don't need to generate it again. You can just go straight to making noise multiple times, as we've seen in the loop. And this time, they're going to use a period table that goes up and it goes down. Essentially, we're using the absolute value, so basically means ignore the sign. And it's j minus 500 divided by 2. So we're starting at 250, dropping to 0, and then rising again. So we're going to go sort of interesting sound. 1,000 bytes to play with. Now in a 16K machine, that's quite a lot of memory, but that's why I only use this in John Hall's Subhunt, because it's a very small program. We change the count and we change the start appropriately. These are quite nice because they're easily exposed. There are also values embedded in the code. That was a lot longer. 1,000 bytes repeated 20 times. They also look at how do you create a ringing sound like a telephone. But here you're creating a period table which is 125, 150 repeated. So essentially you do that by 125 plus 50 times, and it's basically is j odd or even. So when j is even, the value is 125. When j is odd, it is 125 plus 50 times a half. The complex sound is apparently similar to a ringing bell. What happens if you set the period table to random numbers? You can generate your own random numbers using the random routine. But here what we're going to do is get rid of the filling in of the period table. And instead we're going to say, look, our period table instead is going to be part of the Spectrum ROM, which contains numbers, which are machine code, which do actual things. We'll say, look, no, just start at the start and make a noise. It means a lot quicker. Well then, explodey noise. And now here's what I've tried to do to create a klaxon sound where I want it starts low, it rises to a crescendo, holds for a bit, and then drops. We've got a 1000 byte period table. So a slow rise, sustain, and then sudden drop. That was rather splendid, I thought.
Yes, it was a toilet roll all along. You finally found out all my secrets. Well, I hope you enjoyed that anyway. If you enjoyed it, found it of some interest, or possibly even of some use. Thank you for watching. We're back to our normal programming soon. Ta-ta!